I was like, yeah, sure, it's catchy, but I'm like, where's the substance? Substance was there, sis, you just weren't seeing it. Hello, my lovelies. What's good? What's poppin' in the hood? Welcome back to my channel. Today we have another video in the Bangtan book club series. The idea behind Bangtan book club is that we read books that have inspired BTS. This episode we're discussing Jung's Map of the Soul. So this book is written by Stein about the German psychologist Karl Jung. Basically, a massive Karl Jung fanboy compiled all his major ideas into one book, and this is it. But it becomes a journey to find you, with a sprinkling of history about Jung's life and also just some musings from the author. So first I'll be talking about the book itself, and then I'll go into the links to BTS after that. This is just an introduction, so it's not really a deep dive into Jung, but it talks about his different views on the psyche, the Guin, what's happening inside of that. Probably his most famous theory is the 5-part model of the psyche: the persona, the ego, the shadow, the anima/animus, and the self. He explains that the self is who you are, just everything that comprises you. And then you have the ego, which kind of develops at a young age, and that's how you see yourself. And then as you're growing up, you interact with the world and you see that certain things are perceived as negative and certain things positive. So you start to like tweak yourself a bit. Hashtag tweak yourself. Like certain aspects of your ego may be looked down upon or punished, so you kind of section that bit off and you just like pop it into the shadow, parts of yourself that you don't want to be shown, and you kind of just repress that in the unconscious. And then you have the persona, which is the stuff that you do want to present people. It's the personality you present to the world, and obviously this can change from person to person, so you'll have a different persona with your colleagues, to your family, to your friends. But I'm pretty sure we all know these things. Like, if you've had any interest in Map of the Soul, then you must have heard about, you know, the persona, the ego, the shadow. Lots of people have covered those three and the links to BTS in great detail, and if you want to watch videos on that, I'm going to leave some really good videos in the description, because I feel like a lot of people have covered that conversation in depth and a lot better than I could. Ooh, I should put this on the shelf actually, because I've done a lot of research on Map of the Soul after the album came out. I knew a lot of these theories going into the book, and I knew a lot about Karl Jung just from general knowledge and Demian and just research as well. So I found it kind of hard to get through the bits that I already had knowledge on. And as I said, this is like an introduction, so we didn't even go in depth on the things that I was really interested in. But I think what kept me going was the fact that you can tell how much the author loves Karl Jung. Like, Stein knows the ins and outs of this man's mind. So I like the moments where you got to know Jung as a character rather than just hearing about his work. Like his relationship with Freud and Einstein was really interesting, and his views on religion. Yeah, I just really like those moments. There were a lot of things that I didn't know about coming into this book, which I found really interesting, like synchronicity. So basically Jung has this theory of synchronicity, which is the idea that your psyche and the world around you are actually connected. In this book, like, Stein talks about how Jung had these intense dreams and visions, so he'd write them down and use that as the basis for his theories, and like find connection between all the synchronicities. And synchronicities happen all the time. I don't know, it's that, say you're thinking, I hate brownies. Not like you'd ever think this, but you're just like, I hate brownies. And then out of nowhere, someone on the street is like, hello, I baked all these brownies. Would you like a brownie? That's like, there was no link. I just thought that and it happened. How? Synchronicities, that's how. But the bits I found most interesting were the anima and animus. The anima is kind of the soul, and represents the feminine energy within a masculine person, or a mostly masculine person. And then the animus is the spirit and kind of represents the masculine energy in a mostly feminine person. And so the way it's described in the book is that it's kind of like a yin and yang symbol, so like the black and white dots representing the anima and the animus. This aspect actually pops up quite frequently in BTS's discography and isn't really discussed that much. Maybe because they don't go into as much depth in this book and it's not as obvious as, say, the shadow and persona and ego. So let's talk about those. So each of the rappers has a solo where they delve into one of the elements of the psyche, starting off with RM's persona. That song I feel like is the most slept on intro of BTS's entire repertoire. Like, it's a bop and it's literal poetry. Y'all sleeping on it. But yeah, so he talks about his persona as a rapper, and the leader of BTS, and his struggle to stay true to himself as Kim Namjoon, the person. So he's like, persona, who the hell am I? That's the big question, right? This is the intro to the album, and it's introducing the theme of self-discoveries. He talks about the me that I want myself to be, the persona. The me that people want me to be, the persona. The me that you love, the persona. The me that I create, the persona. The me that's smiling, the persona. The me that's sometimes in tears, the persona. Vividly breathing each second and every moment, even now. So this song is called Intro Persona, right? But it strikes me as more of a song about the self. And what you find is that each of the rapper's songs are generally about the self, but focusing on one element. It's all about all the vast intricacies of what makes up the self. And he's kind of saying, all of this is me. The person I want to show to the world is me. The person I want to keep for myself is me. They're all part of me. They're all part of this thing called the self. And then you have Sugar, Sugar's interlude Shadow, where he basically talks about his rise to fame, and how the higher he rises, the scarier it is to fall down. What I love about this is, although it's Shadow, he's very much projecting this persona. So he's like, I want to be a rap star, I want to be king, I want to be rich, I want to know mine, that kind of bravado. Essentially suppressing his shadow throughout the whole song and projecting this persona of August D, Sugar, the rapper, but taking it to like the extreme. And then he takes it so far that the song just like flips and the shadow comes out. The beat completely changes and the shadow's kind of like, we're all part of you, boo. All your shadows, all your fears, all your anxieties, we're all here. We're all part of who makes you you. You can't repress us. You might as well just admit to having a shadow. It's so cool. Like, I love the way everything just flips up and completely changes at the end, and how the whole last verse is done from the perspective of the shadow. Yeah. Cool. So then you have J-Hope's Ego, which is all about reflecting back. So it starts off with audio from their very first intro. I think it's their debut intro, something like that. Big hit exclusive. It's such a throwback, literally going back to the beginning, as it's the way you see yourself. It's the first element of the psyche that's developed out of the three, and yet they chose to have it as the outro, which I kind of see as them coming full circle. So he's saying that finding who he is his journey, but he's just beginning that, and he's saying he's just going to trust himself and figure out his own way. And that's basically the song. I want to point out as well that I saw this on Genius and I didn't clock onto this fact, but I thought it was cool, that ego means this in Korean. Ego, jogo. So when like Hobby and the gospel singers are going like, the map the soul, the map the soul, that's my ego, that's my ego. Like, they're saying that is this, all this is that is this. Like, this is all my journey towards figuring out who I am. And it's also as the outro of the entire album, kind of saying that like, this is BTS's journey. Figuring out who they are, finding themselves is their whole life goal. Anyway, I do want to say that one thing that confused me about this album is Boy With Love. What is a simple, happy love song doing here as their main track? The song that they promoted the most on an album about Jungian psychology. I was like, yeah, sure, it's catchy, but I'm like, where's the substance? The substance was there, sis, you just weren't seeing it. Just weren't seeing it. Now I think I get it. After reading this book, it was reigniting my knowledge on the anima and animus. And basically, it talks about developing the anima. And I did some research, and it turns out that there's 5 different stages to developing the anima that Jung has come up with. They don't really delve into it that deeply in the book, but according to Jung, in our society, the relationship with the anima can also be projected into how men interact with women. Like, an unhealthy relationship with the anima can be detrimental to developing the self and connection with women as well, is what he's suggesting. And I feel like throughout BTS's discography, whether intentionally or unintentionally, they've actually been telling the story of how the relationship with the anima develops. So stage 1, you have the Eve, where women are kind of seen as the object of sexual desire. This can be seen in the problematic classic War of Hormone, where essentially the boys are saying that they're just extremely horny and girls are there to have sex with. And they did apologize for the whole song and release a statement and have never performed it since, and very much frown upon some of the statements that were in the song. But it's important to see where they began on this journey. It's important to see that BTS had a long way to go in the beginning of their career. Then you get the Helen, where women are seen to be self-reliant and intelligent, but lacking certain virtues. Basically, they look pretty on the outside, but on the inside, someone else. And that's where you get Boy in Love. The whole premise of this is like this girl who's basically ignoring all of them as they're trying to get with her, and then they're just getting angry at the fact that they're falling for this girl. Am I reading too much into this? Probably. And then you got the third level, the Mary. I know on the surface this one seems like it should be okay. Like it seems like, oh, it's a good thing, right? Because this is where you see all the virtues of women and you see them as these perfect, virtuous beings. But that's actually just as problematic because it just completely ignores the flaws of women. It makes them into like perfect beings like the Virgin Mary who can do no wrong. And that is where we get 21st century girl. Like the girls are perfect, beautiful, strong. On the surface it sounds great, but it's kind of missing the point. The real development is the final stage, the Sophia. This is where full integration happens and women are seen as multifaceted individuals capable of making mistakes and doing good. Now this is where we get Boy with Love. And this is all about the boys wanting to get to know like the ins and outs, the good and the bad of the anima, so that they can go closer. It's all about nurturing the relationship, which is another aspect of the anima. Now the title references Boy in Love, but the change to with is everything, because now it's about equal footing and mutual understanding. So Halsey's on this track and she's kind of there to represent the anima, but she's singing with them, she's dancing with them. She's not silent or passive or there to be gawked at. Instead of saying things like, oh, you're perfect, you're beautiful, it's like they're just asking questions. Like they want to know, they want to nourish, they want to develop the relationship. And they're actually trying to do that by, would you believe it, getting to know each other. Who'd have thought? We also can't ignore the theory that like all the girls in the music videos represent ARMY, their fan base. Even though like there's literally armies of all genders, this development actually works kind of well because the 3 previous songs before Boy with Love are very specifically about women, whereas Boy in Love actually removes gender from the equation and just makes it about 2 people wanting to get to know each other. It kind of highlights how the anima isn't female but feminine energy, and the anima is within everyone. So I think it works as a good metaphor for both, for the anima and also for relating to their fan base. If you watch their interviews, the interviews are always asking about ARMY, and they make the army, it's so big, it's so, you can't mess with the army, you're gonna get cancelled. Like they make the army into this like big celestial force policing the internet. But in reality, armies are literally just random people. Like they're just people living their life. It's like, it's the 60-year-old man who, you know, goes running at the weekends. It's 13-year-old girl who does javelin. I don't know, random people. They have their own lives, they have their own stories. They're not one amalgamation, they're in fact individual, multifaceted people. Because essentially this song is a love letter to ARMY. The ARMY are individuals with their own lives and stories and positive and negative impacts on the world. And I think that's why they think their song to the ARMY should reflect that. Also, I just want to say, they just were like, we're gonna embrace femininity in this era. Watching BTS develop throughout the years is like watching toxic masculinity slowly be stripped away. It's like watching people slowly unlearn problematic tendencies and then like in the process unlearning my own problematic tendencies. It's so satisfying to watch. Okay, so those are my thoughts on Young's Math of the Soul and the links to BTS. I also want to mention that Murray Stein actually wrote a book. I have the Persona one, but it's basically a rundown of all the links to Karl Jung and BTS's album, which is kind of insane. Like imagine you're writing an album inspired by someone else and they write a book based on your album. In what world does an analyst write a book about the psychological themes of a pop album? Only BTS. Only BTS, fam. So if you just care about the links to BTS, I would suggest probably just buy that book. I think he did a podcast, which is all the same details, so just listen to the podcast. But if you're interested in getting a good introduction to Carl Jung for you to then go and do your own research, definitely would recommend Jung's Map of the Soul. Okay, so the ranking. So I'm gonna rank it on 4 different criteria. The first of which being Big Brain. I would give Big Brain maybe like a 7, because although the theories inside of it are very interesting and it's things that you can apply to your life and it's things that you can really contemplate about, I did know like 90% of this book coming in, and I felt like it didn't go into depth a lot on the things that I wanted to learn about, and I ended up just doing research outside of it by myself. So number 2, writing style. I would give this like a 6. I think the writing style was good. I feel like you can tell how much he loves Jung and how well versed he is in Jung's theories, but there was just nothing that particularly drew me in about the writing style. Number 3, links to BTS. That's gotta be a 10 out of 10. They named their album after the soul. Literally everything in the album is to do with this book, so 10 out of 10. And now the final one is my enjoyment of the book. I would give that like a 6. I think I would have enjoyed it more if this was my first introduction to Carl Jung. After knowing quite a bit about him, it was quite sluggish to get through. Yeah, altogether it was a good book though. I think it's like a 7.25 altogether. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you for watching this video. If you did like this video and you're interested in this series, feel free to check out the other videos that I did. And next time we'll be reading The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula Le Guin. Goodbye. I just want to point out that I absolutely love the book. Like, I read the book on my phone for the most part, and then I bought this just to have a physical copy. And I'm so disappointed because I think I actually would have liked the book a lot better if I'd read it in the physical copy. Oh, it's so floppy. Like, it sits open, and then you can, oh, imagine one hand. You can one hand it. Are you kidding me? This is how all books should be printed. What is the situation where you can't even open a book? You know, when you have to read it and it's like literally like this. And I'm like, fam, what? This is how all books should be.